Last week, an object landed on the shelves of your local video game store. A box both new and yet strikingly familiar. And from this box sprang an intergalactic computer game, the likes of which has not been seen on this planet in over a decade. So sit back and relax as I regale you with the review of this game from among the stars. Hello and welcome back to Dan Does Steam, the channel where we probe deeply into the anus of video games and then make lengthy videos about them in order to justify our excessive spending. I'd like to start off by apologising for the rather long break between this video and the last, and I hope that everyone at home is doing just fine in these very strange and troubled times we're living in. Today we're going to be doing a review of the recently released remake of Destroy All Humans. If you enjoy this video, you can give it a like, and if you really like it and you want to see some of the other stuff, why not check out my channel and possibly even subscribe with the button down below. For the uninitiated Earthbound imbeciles among you, Destroy All Humans was a PS2 game released in 2005, and oh boy did 11-year-old me love that game. 15 years on, and the game has been remade from the ground up and released for the PC, and that's what we'll be reviewing today. The game follows a species of intergalactic colonizers named the Furons. Centuries ago, absolute Furon chads mated with a number of human women on their way back from destroying all life on Mars. And because of this, every human on Earth now has a small strand of Furon DNA inside of them. Cut to the 1950s, and the Furons are back to reclaim the DNA straight out of your asshole. You see, centuries of intergalactic nuclear warfare has left the Furons sans genitalia, meaning that cloning has become their only way of reproduction. However, with each new batch of clones, the quality of the clone has degraded over time, like the people who come out of the American school system. And so a warrior of this race, Crypto-136, was sent to Rockwell, to scout out the planet and to recover this long-dormant Furon DNA. His ship is unfortunately downed, and he's taken to Area 42 for experimentation. You play his clone successor, Crypto-137, and you're sent to find out what happened to your brother and finish the job of conquering Earth by probing every bovine and human anus you can find. I'm going to start off by giving a very quick word to all the nostalgia heads out there. For €30, this is a no-brain buy. If you remember fondly rampaging through 1950s America, giggling at every cow shit joke or anal probe lobotomy, then I'm glad to say the game will probably hold up for you. Maybe a little too faithfully. The complete graphical overhaul, as well as the tweaks to the gameplay to make everything a little bit more precise and responsive, does a great job of rounding out the jagged edges of your fond memories. My first impression was, wow, this looks just as good as I remember, even through the rose-tinted glasses. For all the people coming to the series for the first time, however, it's a little bit more complicated. Destroy All Humans is a product of its time, which it goes out of its way to tell you at the start, although for different reasons than I'm going to be talking about in this review. So let's see if this game holds up against competitors in the modern video games market.
No beet-eating, vodka-swilling, Trotsky-eyed son of a bitch is gonna hijack this great nation's God-given airways. Not on my watch. Charge!
As I mentioned, this game is a remake and not a remaster. That means that every asset has been remade from scratch, probably with an entirely new engine to boot. The graphics in the original were a lot more realistic than the remake, well, as realistic as a PS2 game could get, I suppose, with the latter taking on this more vibrant, cartoonish quality. The studio could have gone the opposite route and used a more powerful tech to enhance the realism, but I think they made the right choice. The lush greens and purples of your alien technology really stand out against the whitewashed walls of suburbia and the reds of the New Mexico desert. I especially like the slightly delayed explosion of buildings when flying around in your saucer, which is clearly a reference to Independence Day. Everything has a sheen to it that really works well with the pulp sci-fi B-movie aesthetic. The fidelity of the graphics isn't incredibly high in terms of lighting and particle effects, but the art style is absolutely lovely to watch in motion. This also means that even in the most intense situations, the game can hold up a consistent frame rate. I had everything at max and never once noticed a stutter or a shudder. There are a couple of issues with the graphics. For the most part everything is fine, but you're going to see the same models over and over again. With the exception of a few key NPCs who you have to either kill or impersonate, every area has maybe 5 to 10 unique models. And that's not quite as bad as the enemy types. There are 3 basic enemy grunts, and they have 2 variations for each one as far as I can tell. There's Army Guy with Helmet, and there's Army Guy without Helmet. There's Majestic Agent with Jacket On, and ooh, Majestic Agent with Jacket Off. The same problem extends to the vehicles that you'll see driving around in the game world. This was a problem in the PS2 version, but you could forgive them because of the limitations of the time. Here, if you spend a lot of time exploring an area, you might get the impression that the Furons aren't the only species who figured out the science of cloning. If I were being generous, I'd say something like this is how Crypto sees the world, with everybody looking the same, and this is an explanation for the uncanny valley Stepford Wives nightmare portrayed in the game. But really, it's probably time and budget constraints. Overall though, this isn't a massive problem, and the art style more than makes up for this shortcoming. A few extra options in the graphics settings might have been nice, but this game should run absolutely fine on any mid to high tier rig.
Now, Crypto, to ensure this invasion runs smoothly, it is imperative we identify the dominant life forms on this world. Those lactating bovoids are likely candidates.
Surely you don't mean those foul-smelling gas bags beyond the fence?
Yes, I'm afraid I do.
The main thing fans of this game will remember is the liberal use of satirical humour. The juxtaposition between the over-the-top depiction of a 1950s apple pie America and Crypto's modern edge and irreverence still holds up well. Some of the jokes can be immature, but if, like me, you are part of the South Park generation, this will be right up your alley.
Earth creature, I am addressing you. Respond or be vaporized. I don't care how many stomachs you have. I don't have time for this.
These lines are delivered perfectly by J. Grant Albrecht, whose contempt for humanity is Crypto's seeds out of every one-liner. The comparison a lot of people make to Jack Nicholson here is totally accurate, both in timbre and the droll way in which he emphasizes certain words.
They eat with their mouths? I think I'm going to be violently ill.
Richard Horvitz plays your commander Orthopox, or Pox for short, who comments on your findings on Earth and gives you your objectives. Horvitz is probably best known as the voice of Invader Zim, and even though he's just playing essentially the same character here, it fits in perfectly, so, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Human warfare is astonishingly primitive, which is exactly what worries me. They're just advanced enough to blow themselves up at any moment, and if they do, our chance of reclaiming our genetic future goes up in a mushroom cloud.
The general musings of the locals you're able to mind read can be pretty amusing, with plenty of jokes being scathing indictments of America in a bygone and much less tolerant era. The audio quality is a mixed bag, however. On one hand, the music seems to have been digitally remastered and sounds sharp and crisp. The mix of theremins and synth sounds perfectly ape the sounds of American sci-fi B-movies. And for the most part, they do a great job of underpinning the cutscenes while mostly staying out of the way during gameplay. Sound effects are similarly well suited, and every laser or electric zap has plenty of punch. The voice lines are strangely hit or miss, however. It seems by the quality that the lines you can hear by reading people's minds have all been re-recorded, but the original voice recordings of the main cast are ripped straight from the original. There's been an attempt to scrub the clips, but it also seems like some have fared better than others. Audio files are really big, so on older consoles they would heavily compress them to fit on the disc. A few of the lines sound so out of place. My guess is that they lost the uncompressed version of those files and had to make do with the original compressed version. Thankfully, this doesn't affect the vocal talent at work, and I could listen to Crypto plot the extermination of us filthy apes all day.
Deep in our hearts, I think what we really wanted was to be just like you.
Really?
Really.
I guess, at the end of the day, we really are all just human beings.
Psych.
Gameplay is split into two parts. The vast majority of the time you're on the ground fighting the locals and impersonating heads of state while making people shit their brains out of their ass. The rest of your time in Rockwell will be spent in your saucer, destroying buildings. The saucer segments are the weakest part of the game. The only thing you do is fly around, blow up buildings, or pick things up and throw them with your tractor beam. The flying sections only make up a small segment of the main missions, however, and only one of the 4 types of challenges you find in each of the areas. The saucer parts are fun enough, but I didn't feel much challenge while playing through the game, and therefore didn't bother to upgrade any of the saucer's abilities. This became a bit of a problem during the final battle, which opens with a comparatively intense saucer battle, which forced me to go back and get enough currency to do some minor upgrades. It only took about an hour to get it, but it was still a bit of a jarring difficulty spike compared to the rest of the objectives involving the saucer throughout the game. Thankfully, the on-foot sections are much more satisfying. Crypto's list of abilities include telekinesis, which, unlike in other games, is unlimited. If you couldn't tell already, this game is more power trip than challenge, and yeah, I'm fine with that. He also has the ability to read people's minds and disguise himself as anybody he manages to catch alone. Two mechanics that feature heavily in what I'll loosely refer to as stealth missions. Then there's the ability to make the heads of people both alive and dead explode in order to collect their brain stems. We'll get back to that one a little later. The other way you're going to be wreaking havoc in this game is with the guns, which admittedly are a little bit limited. Your go-to weapon in the game is going to be the Zap-O-Matic, a gun that can shoot electrical arcs between multiple enemies. The gun is especially useful because it doesn't need any ammo, it just recharges between shots. Later on you can upgrade it to do more damage depending on how much charge is left and how many enemies you happen to be zapping at the same time. The Disintegrator Ray is a machine gun type weapon. It does more damage than the Zap-O-Matic, but it requires ammo, and it also doesn't leave behind a body for you to harvest. The Ion Detonator is basically just a grenade launcher, but the way that it vaporizes victims Attack on Mars style is intensely satisfying. Finally, you have the Anal Probe, and oh my god, what have they done to my boy? In the original, this was used to get larger amounts of brain stems, and they're worth more if you can extract them from living targets. While that's still true here, you also have the ability to extract brains from living people with your Psi abilities. Even though the amount you get is less, you can do this in tandem with firing at other enemies. And later on, when you upgrade this ability to then spread to other enemies automatically, it makes the Anal Probe weapon entirely obsolete. It seems like they added this new feature and then kept the inferior Anal Probe in as a callback for fans of the original. And finally, there's your movement abilities. The jetpack makes a return, allowing you to scale buildings with a lot of upward thrust, and if you hold a button after the fuel has depleted, you can glide over very large distances. And then there's my favourite new upgrade added to the game, which is the Super Kinetic Anti-Grav Thrust Enhancer, or SKATE. Get it? Well, no, because I haven't explained it yet. It basically allows you to use propulsion on your feet to slip around as if you're on a skateboard. It works really well to escape blast radius, and is also just really fun to mess around with. In fact, almost all of the abilities that you get are. And that's why it's such a shame that they never get truly developed. The first few missions take you through how to use your powers, but the tasks never really get any more complex. You'll only ever be given one task at a time that needs you to use an ability, and then the next task will have nothing to do with it. For example, every single stealth mission goes like this. Find a person you can disguise yourself as to get into the restricted area. Get to the objective without being caught. Mind read or kidnap important NPC, get back to your saucer, and then rampage either on land or in the air. The game never really gets to flesh out its mechanics in interesting ways. This is sort of a problem with the original game, as this is a straight shot-for-shot remake. When the game came out on PS2, it was half game, half tech demo, which was fine for the time, but now a lot of the things that were ahead of their time, like the physics system, are pretty commonplace. The main story will only last about 5 to 8 hours, and the side objectives boil down to 4 different minigames. There's an on-foot race where you chase a droid, there's a rampage where you have to kill a certain type of enemy, a saucer version of the rampage, and finally an abduction mission where you have to throw certain types of objects into a moving tractor beam. And honestly, going on your own little rampage is far more fun and a much faster way to collect currency. This is the crux of the issue here. How much enjoyment you get from the game will really hinge on how much fun you can have causing complete and utter chaos. I had a decent amount of fun doing this, but I remember it being a lot more engaging when I was younger. But if you're the kind of person who likes to save their game, turn on God mode, and then terrorize a bunch of 3D models, this game is one of the most fun ways that you can do this.
Ah! Little green spaceman! Ah!
I am not green.
The lack of substantial content is somewhat reflected in the price tag. I think the devs knew they couldn't charge €60 for what's on offer here. This could have been a reimagining of the first game, like we've seen with Final Fantasy VII, rather than just a straight next-gen upgrade. The game is still as fun as it was in the day, but that's sort of the problem. The fun hasn't been upgraded or modernized, it's exactly as fun as it was before, but flashier. But unfortunately, the bar has moved since then. I'm not trying to harp on the game too much, I did genuinely enjoy my time with it, and it did its job to scratch my nostalgic itch for a game which I loved when I was younger, but perhaps didn't see its flaws at the time. I really do hope that the game does well financially, and instead of remaking the rest of the series, that they use this as a jumping off point to modernize the franchise. So THQ, if you're listening to this, go get the original voice talent, watch reruns of Invader Zim, and think about how all the new technology can enhance not only the core gameplay loop, but the entire scope of the game. So I'm going to give this game 2 different scores depending on who you are. If you're new to the game, and this franchise in general, I'm going to give the game a 6. It's really fun, the gameplay loop is great, and it really gives you the sense of being this really powerful alien just going and cutting down swaths of humans who don't really know what to do with your presence. However, the lack of mission content and just content in general, as well as the sort of anemic nature of the side quests, and the fact that they don't really do their purpose in that you can get more currency just from going on a rampage, does hold the game back in a significant way. If, however, like me, you're in this for the nostalgia, I'm going to give it an 8.5. The difference in how it feels and the graphical updates and the physics updates and all those kinds of things really help to smooth out the difference between what you remember the game being and what it actually was. Don't go back and play the PS2 version before you play the remake. Play the remake, it will be exactly the way you remembered it in your mind. It is worth mentioning though that you have to be cognizant of the game's flaws, and the major flaw here is just a lack of content. And regardless of who you are, if you can get this game on sale, do not hesitate. Even if it's just something that you stick on when you're listening to a podcast or an audiobook or something to just go have some mindless fun, I highly recommend it for that purpose. Oh, thanks for making it to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed. If you want to see any more of my content, you can check down in my channel below. You can also check out my other series, The Steam Pilgrimage, where I'm attempting to play through every single game on my Steam list and write a little doohickey about it. The next video in the series is going to be about the use of unreliable narration in the BioShock games. So if you like what you've seen here and you want to check that video out, hit subscribe and you'll get a notification when the video comes out. I hope you all do very well, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, monkeys. You want a war? You got a war.